Okay, boleh vinaka, everyone. Okay. Thank you for joining in on a beautiful evening. Singa bukelulu na karusanga vulka biti ni singa ni bula o Julai. Ni bula vinaka. Kami ni kua kero na vitala na chukina kendo na ngone lewa. Buli tiko na University mai Otago. Mai na dheba ke New Zealand. Ni meranga ni da tikvu na nanda vitala noa. And then rongo da mande ndo na seri. Na sere nga tando rongoda chiko na be ngono kede tando be Talanoa kina na sere na wanua do morning. Okay, so let me share this. Okay, okay. Ni taka ni mbula vinaka tiko na punata panga ni barong tiko mekina ni mbula vinaka. It's a beautiful evening here in Honolulu, and I hope that you're all having a wonderful evening wherever you are listening from. So here we are, Vanua the morning. Ni bula vinaka na viokani ni barong tumena kabinanga ni signi kwa sa ochungona walu ena tin kalimna miniti bakambula sara chiko bera na sema tiku mai ena bese viti kena bese buru bakambula sara chingo kina ena yana tatoko la kemba malo ambula jina mbalao ni lotu, totoko bakaoti ni hauma, vinaka vakalevu na ngante tiku me vanua, dombulu vinaka me Amerika, Susana vakaloloma, Merseni balele buka, dombulu vinaka na biokan to siamu tiku me ngonesa savakara, ke vakatal ngakina mai vanua levu, dombulu vinaka me lambasa, dombulu vinaka mai sabu-sabu, vakatal ngakina yana totoka utavi uni. Ngora tuka ni ngona bakambula, vikem ni kere sara ni biokan ni barong tiku mai, na kavini kua, tiku ngoto nanta bulangi. Na ngone leongo o Namrata Chan nakapatiko ko na buli ni PhD na University mai Otago me New Zealand. Meta na bakambula sarungo bikoy au klani do na Talanoa totoka Talanoa momona and na rongo na kabini ko. So taking this time Nam to welcome you on my program. I was just greeting everybody and saying how special this evening will be, given the fact that you are going to share your PhD research with us, and not only what you're doing now, but we will go back in time to hear your story. You know, what inspired you to follow these footsteps all the way from the island of Vitilevu to South Island in Aotearoa. So perhaps to kickstart our Talanoa, can you just say hello to our audience tonight, Nam?
Iyo. Ni sambula vinaka everyone. Naya zangu o Namrata o marama nilotoka maiviti. I'm very happy to be part of your show. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. T. I'm the 4th generation in my family to have been born and brought up in Fiji. My mom's from Nandronga, and we till today live on a beautiful sugarcane farm in Lotoka. I'm the youngest out of 3 siblings. We are 3 sisters, and I went to primary school and high school in Lotoka, and afterwards I went off to University of Otago for an undergraduate degree in marine science. And then I came back to Fiji for a period of 5 years, and in the year 2020 I was lucky enough to start off a PhD in marine science, and it was quite different in terms of COVID and the borders closing. So after more than 2 years, this is the first time for me to come back home and visit my family.
Wow, that's wonderful. Vinaka vakalevu. So saying bula to everyone connecting in from Lotoka, so to the sugar city, Dola Vina, and everybody connecting in from Nandronga, the beautiful town of Singatoka. So saying Dola Vina to everybody from the West. As they say, West is best. So I'm so glad that Nam you're representing them today. Yeah. So Vinaka Nam. Now, when you went to school, you know, from primary school, you know, usually many of us by class 3 or class 4, you know, when teachers ask us or friends ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up? Was there a particular answer that you normally give them when people ask you?
That's a very good question. And I remember my grandfather would always ask me this when we were in primary school. And I think as you go to primary school, one of the first role models you see is your teacher itself. And in terms of career pathway, one of your my first answers would be a teacher. And then it varied from what I started liking in life to a teacher, to a chef. And by the time I reached high school, it was more leaning towards being an accountant or an economist. And here I am in the field of marine science. So yeah, you can have many dreams and ambitions, and there's nothing bad about that, but being flexible.
Absolutely. Wow, that's wonderful. Good to know, you know, about those dreams and visions you had as a young girl. Well, can you say again the schools you went to when you went to primary school?
Yeah. So I grew up in Saweni in Lotoka. It's near Visaisei, and it's very close to University of Fiji, and we still live there today. And so I went to primary school, to Gurukul Primary School. It's right opposite University of Fiji. And after that, I went to Natambo High School, which was a big change for me in terms of coming from a peri-urban school of Gurukul to going to a school where they put the best of the best in terms of students. that the first 2 years were a big shock for me in terms of how to adjust to a very new way of, like, the culture itself was very new for me. So I spent 5 years in Atombo High.
Wow, that's wonderful. Shout out to all the net ex-scholars out there. I'm sure most of them always follow the program. So it's really nice to see a graduate of Natambo High School doing so well academically. And we're also very proud of you. And I'm sure your family as well. So from Natambua, were you doing science, of course, there, or what were your subjects that you were taking?
That's a very good question, just because after Form 3 and Form 4, from Form 5 to Form 7, I decided to take commerce. So I was doing accounting, economics, and computer science as my major for 3 years. And in terms of being in high school, that's how I planned my career pathway to unfold. So I was going in the field of either specializing in economics, finance, or accounting at that stage.
Wow, that's amazing. It's interesting, from arts, and then now you switch into, marine science. So what made you choose that pathway? What was the time when everything changed or shift?
And so I knew in being in high school, I knew that I needed a scholarship to get through university. And in my family, my parents highly valued education. So when my mom grew up in Nandronga, they used to travel more than 1 kilometer on bare feet to get to school every day. And I'm pretty sure most of us in Fiji can reflect either on our grandparents or parents' days when they would have loved to have the opportunities we had today in terms of education and the sacrifices they had to make for their family in terms of giving up their education to look after their family. So my grandparents and my parents highly valued education just because they weren't able to attain it as easily. And also being female and getting tertiary education in those days was really hard. And I come from a socioeconomic background family where I knew I needed a scholarship to get through high school. Just because my dad looks after a sugarcane farm that was passed from his great-grandparents' days, and he also works as a taxi driver. And at that stage, I was applying for multiple scholarships, and there was a scholarship by the Fijian government that came up for New Zealand. And at that time, it was only in the field of aquaculture and fisheries, something I had known about briefly, but not too much. And I decided to apply for that. And fortunately enough, I am very grateful for that scholarship. I was able to get it after a tough round of interview in terms of how I will handle my transit from being a commerce student to going to a science student in a country I've never been to, in a field which is very new to me.
Wow, that's wonderful, man. Vinaka vakalevu nam. And I think for the parents that are watching tonight, I think it's really important that you listen in and hear this story, because Nam's story will really assist some of our youths tonight who may be wanting to change pathways and choose other subjects, just so they feel that they're not alone. So if Nam can do it and can succeed in choosing a different pathway, then they can as well. So I know you have a PowerPoint presentation that you wanted to show us. So for our listeners, you will enjoy this video presentation, photograph presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, where she will tell us a little bit about her upbringing and her educational career pathway that she followed until especially the topic of her research. So I might just kind of put a hint to the Fijians watching. She's doing some research on the lumi. So I know most of us love to eat lumi. I love to eat lumi. And Nam will be sharing to us the research she's doing on that particular lumi, but she will expand a little bit more. So over to you, Nam.
Vakalevu. So I'll just share my screen. So I'm from the western side of vakalevu for everyone watching. So that's Lotoka. In the first few photographs, that's how my home looked like. At the bottom is a photograph after the sugarcane has been cut. So like you said, Sugar City, really, really hot. And I spent my entire life till I was 18 in Lotoka. And after that, I traveled to University of Otago, which is in Dunedin. And if anyone knows Dunedin, it's the home of the Highlanders. If you are a super rugby fan, that's where the Highlanders come from. And it is cold. Their summer is a high of 18 degree, which is like Fiji winter to us. And so the cold was definitely a shocker to my system. And when I went to Dunedin, on a scholarship, I spent 3 years doing my degree in the field of aquaculture and fisheries. It was a very hands-on program. The first year of university was very different. It was like learning ABC all over again because the language of science was not, it didn't come easy to me in my first year. Everybody would get tired of doing the same experiments, whereas I'd be very excited because I was doing it for the first time. And we got to have lots of practical experience on the field from first year. They'll put us out on a boat. They'll teach us lots of research methods as well. So the first 3 years flew by and really equipped us for research and career pathways afterwards. And I was grateful I took that step. So after I finished my degree, I came back to Fiji for a period of 5 years. And so one of the first places I started off was with University of the South Pacific. I was helping in teaching and research. So I was helping in lab demonstrations. I was helping in tutoring, and I was helping in research related to sea turtles in Fiji. And I really enjoyed meeting students of different Pacific backgrounds, all over from Kiribati, Vanuatu, just because when I was in Otago, we had a very small Pacific community, but not as large as USP. And afterwards, I volunteered and also was involved in a lot of marine conservation programs from NGOs such as Wildlife Conservation Society. And Fiji is the place where I learned how to dive. And there was an organization called Global Vision International. And I was glad to dive in warmer waters or start learning how to dive. So this was a small island near Motoriki or near Ovalau called Dangalai, where I did most of my scuba diving. And I really liked doing community work with the schools there in terms of teaching them about marine science program and how they can look after their reefs. And one of my last jobs before I started my PhD was working for a UN Habitat program, which is involved in strengthening climate resilience among informal settlements in Fiji. So in Fiji, there's a lot of informal settlements, and in the face of climate change, they do need a lot of strengthening. So my family itself in 2016 we lost our family house in Cyclone Winston just because it was so powerful. And it was really devastating to see my parents and my grandparents lose their home that they've known for a long time. And for me to lose a lot of memories as well. And it got me thinking that that's the reality for many Fijian families today in terms of when November comes, some of them would straight away be thinking about the cyclone season. And I always wanted to be able to contribute towards that field. So I really enjoyed working in the field of climate change with communities and people. After being in Fiji, I decided to start my PhD, go back to Otago and start my PhD. And so my PhD today involves lots of aspects. You'll find me out scuba diving in the field a lot, looking at seaweed. So the water is not as nice and warm as Fiji. My first dive was in August, which is winter in New Zealand, and it was 9 degrees. So that was something personally I thought that would be impossible for me. But once you get over that step, it's not so bad. And our lab is by the sea as well. So I spend a lot of time in the lab and out at sea. And I also help in teaching primary school and high school students who come and visit us. We have an education center where we're based. I really do like teaching. So I teach them about the marine life. And going back to my research interest, if we look at ourselves in the Pacific, whether it be Fiji or Samoa, every Pacific Island country loves eating seaweed, whether it be nama in a tuna salad or lumi. Seaweed actually forms a lot of our cultural lifestyle. You'll see women in the market selling these, and it's a big, like, it's a source of income as well. It's a lifestyle for us as well. And in Fiji, the seaweed industry is expanding in terms of farming seaweed now, and seaweed being used in lots of commercial products. And if you look at your own relationship with seaweed, maybe you're not living in the Pacific, but think about maybe what you had for lunch yesterday. It might have been sushi, and sushi is wrapped in seaweed. And seaweed has compounds that are found in everyday products. It has a product called carrageenan and agar that's used to make jelly-like things. So it's found in ice cream, it's found in toothpaste, it's found in candy. So we might not even know it, but we're consuming a lot of things derived from seaweed in our everyday life. And so this is where I'm currently based in the South Island, and my study area is Otago Harbor, which is very different again. I don't see coral reefs there. I see lots of seaweed though, and sea lions and seals, things I'll never see in Fiji. And what has been one of the most challenging yet accomplishing part for me, it did take me some time, I will be very honest, to make friends with the cold water, has been scuba diving, just because one of the best ways to study the underwater world is to submerge yourself in it. And for most of my research, we'll have to dive every month, whether it be winter or their summer, because I had equipment underwater that needed changing, and I had to collect seaweeds every season. So this aspect of mine wouldn't have been possible without my teammates or my lab group, who helped me out a lot in this field. And I'm happy to talk more about it. So yeah, that's a short presentation of where I am right now with my research.
Wow, that's amazing. Ooh, that deserves a huge clap. Makasawsaw mana. We can think about Robert my man. Your story, needs to be celebrated. And I know there are many other young women and even older women out there who are achieving so much, and I'm so glad that my program, can be used in that regard, to empower others.
Yeah,
That's a mission of the reason why I do what I do on this program. So I have a question about diving.
yeah,
Because I'm a person who loves swimming. I love going out swimming, in the river, in the
yeah.
ocean. But when it comes to diving, I get really scared. Now, what was your first experience when you were told that you have to go and do diving? What was it like?
In Fiji, when I was told I'll go diving, I was initially scared, but then after a few times you get comfortable, I was really excited because the water would always be clear, and you'll get to swim with all these fishes. You'll see sambutu swimming, like you'll see all these fishes that you just see otherwise in the fish market. So it was amazing seeing them alive. When I started my PhD, I deliberately wanted to choose a topic where I don't do any diving because I was very afraid of the cold. And I tried to delay it for as much as I could till I could no longer. And my supervisor, he said, we'll have to dive for your work. Or he had a vision in terms of knowing that I could do it more than I had. And so I still remember the first day, thinking how I'll do it. After we went out on a boat, and I had a very thick, it's called a wetsuit, and in Fiji, I only ever used, in terms of how thick it was 2 millimeters. And over in Dunedin, I use a wetsuit that's 9 millimeters thick. So you really have to be covered. And it was the first time I was wearing gloves and a hood for my head. And that was one of the things I thought would be impossible for me. So we were out on the boat, and I'm feeling funny in terms of how much gear I have on myself, feeling like a mummy from Egypt who's just super covered. And when we did plunge, when I took my first step, I said, oh, this is actually not too bad. And then we went down. And after that, I was like, oh, right, this is actually not too bad. And then one of the things that always struck me, or one of the best ways I could describe diving in cold water, say you're under the hot sun on a very hot day and you decided to eat one very cold cool pop or drink a bottle of Coke very, very quickly. And sometimes when you try to drink something cold so quickly, you have a brain freeze or your head starts to ache. So the cold water on my face felt like that initially. Um, but it was very refreshing, rather very refreshing. And yeah, till till today, it's been my sort of like biggest enemy yet best friend trying to accomplish that part in terms of my research.
Wow, man, that's wonderful. It's a big a lesson that we learned there from the what you just shared now, man. That like as you said, it's an enemy, but yet your best friend. So it's something that how to conquer our fear, right? Because all of
Yeah,
us have fears. They have a lot of people have different things that they're afraid of. But I just take my hat off to you. When I saw your pictures out there enjoying your diving in Rangalai and then also in back in Otago, as the weather is not on our
yeah,
side in terms of temperature, you survived, and look, you're still
yeah,
here right now talking to us.
yeah,
Wow, Naka
yeah.
vakalevu. Now, what about the seaweeds and the nama and the lumi? Before you start researching it, have you ever kind of consumed them, or was it something of interest to you when you were young?
When I was young, I'd often see it in the markets being sold, and I'd consume it whenever I'd go to my friend's house, or I'll consume it in a tuna salad. But in terms of thinking beyond it, I would not. And after I did my bachelor's degree, when I came back and I was working for an NGO, called Wildlife Conservation Society. They do a lot of work with women in rural areas in fisheries, because if you look at our islands, most of the women will go out and fish, whether it's for their families, just for dinner time, or for selling in the markets. And Nama and Lumi was one of the products that they were trying to get into the markets and get paid for what they really deserve. And that's when farming seaweed was also getting of high interest as well. And so, in terms of consumption, that was always on my mind in terms of how valuable it is and how it could be used as a good form of income as well to the communities. And I forgot to mention this part, but I also did my master's in USP while I was in Fiji. And I did my master's on something called seagrass. In Fijian, the word is wutia. And it's similar to seaweed, but it has roots. So in today's world, seagrass is regarded as one of the solution in terms of it stores carbons in its roots. So it's a good solution for combating climate change because it's a storage. And so for my master's, I mapped that in Suva Lagoon. And what sparked my interest to keep researching in the field, or this field, was these are good solutions, because we know that we are in a environmental crisis today. And one of my drivers has been, how can we use science to find solutions or be part of a solution,
Mm.
because we are very aware of um, the direction we're headed with the environment. And that was one of the key drivers for me. And when I got to Otago, my supervisor actually studies seaweeds a lot. And over there, like how we have coral reefs, they have seaweeds growing. And the seaweed I'm studying, it's a endemic seaweed, so it only grows in New Zealand. It is like their coral reefs. It grows in muddy parts. It's not consumed, but it hosts a lot of animals, like how babies go to kindy when all the sea creatures are young. Most of them would like to live in these seaweed habitats before they go out into the open ocean. So it serves a lot of function, but we don't know enough about it. So my PhD is researching into how these seaweeds grow all year around, how these communities change, because like in winter will dress differently compared to summer. Seaweeds would behave the same way. They wouldn't stay the same in winter because temperatures change, things change in the water versus how they'll behave in summer. So I'm researching how this changes and how does things like temperature affect them, light, and then I'm trying to highlight its values in terms of how much purpose it serves to us humans. Like just because we can't necessarily see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yes, that's interesting. Now I'm going to look at sushi in a different way. As you mentioned that, it's covered with seaweed, but also you mentioned that
Yeah,
there are so many other products, right? That seaweed is used for. So
yeah.
you mentioned a few. What else can you remind us that is made from seaweed that we may not think of?
Sometimes it's used in cosmetics. So females, if you're applying cosmetics like lipstick, for example, just because it's the extracts derived from seaweed agar and carrageenan is used as a thickener. So it's used in thickening products naturally. It's used in a lot of vegan products as a substitute for animal fats as well. And so a lot of candies, ice cream, jelly, cakes, everyday products will have extracts derived from seaweeds. And one of the newest uses of seaweed in terms of research has been used in terms of, I'll give you an example from New Zealand, has
Uh-huh.
been feeding it to cows or cattle. So New Zealand's biggest, in terms of climate change, greenhouse gas emission is methane. And so methane comes from the biggest contributor is cows, the dairy industry. So in terms of where does this come from, it comes from when a cow burps or farts. And it's a very, very hard greenhouse gas to control. So scientists have recently discovered that there's this red seaweed called asparagopsis. So it's being turned into cattle food, and if you feed it to these cattle, what it does, it lowers their methane emissions. And so I really like how seaweed can be used as solutions in innovative ways for so many things in the future. And who knows, there's probably so much more to come. So it's an exciting time to be in the field of science, especially to be able to find solutions to things that we wouldn't have otherwise known.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's so exciting now, man, that you're in this field and just amazing that this was not a field you thought about, but for some
Yeah.
reason the pathway was there in front of you and you reacted to it, you embraced it, you made it your own, and look where you are now. So you have a very bright future, and it's just lovely that you are here tonight to empower us. So I have two more questions, but before I ask the other two, I
Yeah.
was just wondering, because there's a lot of mothers listening in tonight and some
Yeah.
dads too. And
Yeah.
of course, they will be talking to their daughters. So we'll talk to the girls first. What would you say to a young girl listening in tonight who's interested to do something similar, in the field of marine science or anything to do with the ocean or research? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to put their education as a priority, whether you're interested in the field of science or commerce or computer science or mathematics. Sciences is a really broad field. We are moving along from the days where we aspire to only be a lawyer, doctor, or teacher. There's girls in engineering, girls in robotics. So I would say at a least prioritize your education and get your degree. In terms of making education more accessible, it's been nice to see the opportunities in terms of scholarships and loans available to young Fijians now. So I would say really, really make use of that, because as my mom used to say to me, she would say, your education is something that no one can take away from you. And it's very true. I think if you education is a way of empowering generations. So get your education. And in terms of the mothers, I think it's a mother's job to worry. My mom would worry a lot whenever I'm out on a boat going to the field. As much as she's supported, she'd also be quite worried. And I was lucky enough to have a mom who'd always be encouraging of my education, because I was a person who would have finished her degree, and then I would have been already planning my next move in terms of doing a master's. And then once I did finish my master's too, I got into the field of doing my doctorate. So in terms of parents having patience and supporting them, because you'll see a lot of pathways, and none of like all of them are right in their own ways, in terms of starting off a family, having a career, or still continuing to study. Like, you are where you need to be, but also my advice would be to get your education.
Wow, yes, vinaka vakalevu nam, for your words of advice. Yeah, it's really wonderful. I think over the last 2 years of me hosting this program, I've received so many beautiful emails from stay-home moms. Some of them have mentioned, Dr. T, my children are all gone to school now, and now I wanted to complete my own studies. I didn't finish it when I started my family. So it's really nice
Right.
that you are also encouraging them, right? That our dreams is
Yeah.
always there for us to fulfill. What do you think, Nam?
Yeah. I agree. I absolutely agree. And I would say it's never too late. Even my mom now, one of the biggest ways she'll learn is after she does her chores, she'll get on her phone and look at educational videos of learning languages or learning things. So I agree with you. And my mom's in her 50s or late 50s now. So for all the moms, it's actually never too late to learn and pursue your interest. And look how fortunate we are to have technology and lots of free education, whether it be through different websites or YouTube. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Dr. T.
Wow, vinaka vakalevu. As you said that the education is something that no one else can take away from you. Eh? So it's an investment
Yeah,
on our own,
yeah,
self-empowerment. So vinaka vakalevu,
yeah.
for encouraging us. And I heard you a few times mention scholarship as well. Was it difficult for you to find scholarship during your time?
It initially was quite challenging for me when I was in high school, to find scholarships, just because at that time not a lot of countries were giving scholarship to Fiji, and the only option available to me was the scholarships available from Fiji itself. And I was very grateful um, for the government in order to get the one I got for my degree, because it
Mm.
opened a lot of pathways for me. So after a scholarship for my undergraduate, when I did came back home, I relied on another scholarship to get me through my master's degree. And currently for my PhD, I'm also on a scholarship from the university itself, which I'm very grateful for. And in terms of, I think where I'm getting to is, I come from a background where I knew I I valued education a lot. And sometimes finance can be a barrier in terms of getting there. But I would say search as much as you can in terms of the options available, and talk to people who would help you find these options. Like, multiple people helped me when I was filling out this application. Someone would help me scan it. So um, talk to people and have a good set of friends and teachers around you. You can ask for help. And if you're in high school, whether you're in from 5 or 6, it's never too early to start thinking or looking out at scholarship options available out there, just because it eases a lot of things and provides a very valuable opportunity. So I've always been very grateful for scholarships and the financial help that I've been able to get for my education.
Wow, vinaka vakalevu. So for our listeners, that's a really good point that Nam has mentioned. For the Form 5, Form 6 students, don't think that it's too early to look for them now. While you're still in Form 5, Form 6, start searching. Start doing your research, as what Nam has said. And she did exactly that. And that's something that is really a very good thing to do. Yeah? So the more familiar you are with scholarships, when the time comes for you to apply, I think you just have
Yeah,
like an added advantage, right? Because you have
I
a knowledge
agree.
of understanding. Yeah.
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 And then when the time comes, it won't feel too alien to you. It can be quite scary when you look at applications, when you have to fill in long essays, but do not let that process stop you. Give it a go. Who knows? The, you might be the only few people sometimes applying for it or in that field, but maximize all the opportunities that come your way in terms of applying.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
wonderful, Reza.
and
Ask questions. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, start early, and it's great if you have elder siblings who've been through that pathway as well. For me, that was a big help. My elder sister's always encouraging me, seeing them go through USB with a scholarship and how it was able to open doors for them, and being able to have teachers you can go to. I always had my best friend who I would apply for scholarships to, because she was always trying to get into medicine with scholarships, and I knew. So we'd sit down at home with newspapers, flip through, and find as many as we can. And now it's gotten easier with things being online on the internet. You get access to many more opportunities. So for all the high school students listening and their parents, I would encourage you to at least shortlist some of the ones you want to apply for, because nothing is more hurtful than finding out you've missed the due date.
Yeah, Nasaranga. Wow, that's
Yeah,
wonderful. I can picture you and your friends in the kitchen, flipping through the newspaper. That's wonderful. Yeah,
yeah,
see, if you do
yeah,
it in such a way where you're not doing it alone. If you have another
yeah,
friend who thinks the same level as you, wow, that's awesome.
yeah,
You're on
yeah.
this journey not by yourself, but you have a good moral support. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, and that's always played a big part in my life. So having a good set of friends in terms of, so when I did transition to Natambua as well from primary school, and being a teenager where you think you're always right and you probably have it figured out, it can be a very hard time for an individual as well as their parent. So I would say be patient and choose friends who have similar values and interests as you. So I was lucky to have friends who valued education a lot, and we were on the pathway together to achieve good grades, get scholarships, and in terms of we knew pathways we wanted to go down towards, and that also helped me in university level as well, in terms of the groups you surround yourself with and the community around you. If they aspire for the same things, it makes it easier for you to drive yourself. It almost feels like you're on the same boat and paddling together.
Wow, that's wonderful. Man, vinaka vakalevu nam. Now, in terms of before I go, and because I know you would have had some really good experiences. Is there a particular place or a project that you always kind of like remember? Maybe you had a wonderful experience talking to the community. You just had a wonderful time, diving and doing research. Is there a particular project or place that you wanted to share?
I always so when I'm sitting in Dunedin in the cold, I always reflect back to my time on Bangalai. So Bangalai was a where I learned most of my diving. So we'd stay in a very small bures. 6 people in one bure, and we'd have 4 bures, lots of volunteers, lots of Kevalangis would come from overseas to learn diving on that island. And we wouldn't have any electricity, and we wouldn't have any running water. We'll drink water from the tanks, and there was only 1 hour generator to charge your phone. And a lot of the food we'll eat would be vegetarian as well. And we'll have to wake up at 6 o'clock, do duties, and set up our dive gear and go diving from 8 in the morning. So strict schedule. And it seemed tough to adjust at first, and very, I would say, very simple living conditions, but the diving there were some of the most beautiful dives I had done, and the friends I'd made are still my friends today. So some of the things I saw, like the vonu, the varivode, are some creatures that is very hard to find elsewhere. So those were very special memories. And we got to work with people, the community members from Motoriki, the children from those schools. So I really liked the communities. And most recently, so I have just 3 weeks ago, I just come back from a trip to Lau Island, Lau group, and it was for a seagrass or blue carbon research funded by an organization in Australia, CSIRO. And so I helped to identify seagrass, and I went with them. So we went to different islands. We started in Vanambalavu, we went to Fulanga, Onieta, Moala. So lots of different islands, and going to Laos felt like being in a time machine and going back in the days with how our reefs looked like, how the environment was, and how the people was. And in Onieta, I just was blown away by the amount of nama right on their doorsteps. And within 10 minutes, they'll have a whole basket full. In terms of, they'll just walk a few like footsteps from the sand, and there's this huge nama bed. So I think this surely wasn't a path that I imagined to go down on, but it's given me so many special memories, and I've really enjoyed working with communities and their people. Just because if you look at it, if I look at my own family, every Sunday our family meal was ika vakalolo. So every household, I can't imagine Fiji or the Pacific Islands without the water, without the seafood. And for future generations, it's also very important to have that going as part of our culture. So it's really nice wherever I go, sharing stories with the village people, the women, the men, of how things are changing and how they still like going out fishing and what they see. So that's been very enjoyable, where I've been able to travel in Fiji.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the Lawan hospitality is something else. Eh, Nam?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, very hard to live low.
Wow. See, to all our Lao friends connecting in tonight, Nam is a champion of Lao. I'm sure even when she talked about Lao, her smile just got wide. Yeah, vinaka vakalevu, Nam. So they must have fed you really nicely too, Nam. Hmm?
They were very nice and generous. Yeah, they'll give us their nama, and yeah, they're very kind people. Yeah.
Yes, well done, vinaka vakalevu, Nam, for just being here and hearing your story. I really want to acknowledge the individuals, a few of them who messaged me about your story, and they were like, "Oh, look at this beautiful lady here. Can she come on your program?" And I was like, "Of course." I listened to your Radio New Zealand interview, and I was
Yeah.
really proud of you. So I just wanted to, I think, on behalf of our listeners who are listening in tonight, just like to acknowledge you, the hard work that you're doing, and I know you have one more year to complete your PhD. For you to finally get your doctorate. So maybe there's some potential PhD candidates who are listening right now. What would you like to tell them, especially when people hear PhD, they get really scared, I felt like that too, it's something like, when I finished my master's, I was kind of nervous. I was like, oh, no, I cannot, reach that level. But what would you like to say to them Nam, in your current journey in doing your
I
PhD?
can relate to that as well, Dr. T. And I guess coming from Fiji, where I didn't see a lot of people around me having a PhD, it's a very alien word. Or what is it? So I'll basically describe a PhD in terms of the highest level of a degree you can attain, a doctorate. And personally, after my master's as well, self-doubt would often kick in and thinking, no, this is not for me, or it feels like the impossible. And my current supervisor has been a really great mentor to me. He said to me, he said, you don't need to be the smartest person in the room to do a PhD. A PhD is a lot about consistency. And he said, a PhD is about being a leader. It's about being able to lead research projects. And to me, I always had that at heart, that I one day would be able to lead a lot of research projects in the Pacific. Because if you look at the Pacific, we come from large ocean states. And I think it's a good mindset to have if we look at ourselves in terms of the resources we have in terms of our ocean. And I think the best custodians of any resource are the locals. They'll be the ones who have the most knowledge and a lot of traditional knowledge of how to look after their marine life and resources. So whom best to look after it and take charge than you? So to all the local people listening, I would say do not underestimate yourself, and you yourself will be able to lead some of the best research yourself in terms of making a difference in your communities, because you value it and you care for it the most.
Wow, dia nasaranga, eh? And you're doing it from the heart. And you know that, yeah, where you live, your village, your ngolingoli, they are all the gifts from your ancestors. And you know, what a wonderful way to connect that and education, to mix it together. So encouraging a lot of our young ones listening in. Marine science is a wonderful field. If you're kind of sitting on the fence and not knowing what to do, Nam is right here, and she has shared her email address on her presentation PowerPoint. So if anyone wants to get hold of her, just let me know, and I can connect you with with her. So man, Nam, I would love to talk to you for the next 2 hours. It's just so beautiful listening to you. But now we've come to the end of our Talanoa program, because I promised you for half an hour to 45 minutes, but it just got so interesting as we continue our Talanoa. So maybe to conclude our Talanoa session today, what is in front of you now? For you, Nam, you have one more year of research. What is in store for you post-graduation? What would you like to share about that?
I would still like to continue in the field of research and teaching. I realize that I do enjoy being able to share my knowledge. And one of the fields, Dr. T, that you're doing right now through this is communication. So I'd like to go into the field of being able to take the science to people in everyday, simple languages. So it's something that I think Fiji has taught me, because most of our marine resources, who owns it and who looks after it is just everyday people in beautiful villages. And they would need information in very simple language that they can understand to look after their resources. So I would like to continue research in the field of marine science and environmental science in the Pacific, and be involved in education. And one of the most important things that I suppose I'd like to say, and that's helped me a lot, and you often hear it in Fiji, is it takes a village to raise a child. So where I am in life, I'm very grateful to my grandparents, my parents, my siblings, all the teachers I've had in my life, primary school till uni today, and all the mentors I have as well. So look around you. There's lots of good mentors from your parents to your siblings, and acknowledge and ask for help and take all the help that you can get from around you, because yeah, it does truly take a village.
Wow, totoo ka vakawati. Man, mundo, vinaka vakalevu nam for, taking the time away from your busy schedule. I know you have a lot on right now, especially with your current research you're doing. You just returned from Lao, and I'm sure I have a few Laoans listening in, Malo Mbula, and especially you mentioning about the island of Oneata with the sea grapes, nanama, just right
Yeah,
on their doorstep. Wow. That's one island I
yeah,
want to visit in
yeah.
Oneata. So to those of you from Oneata listening in, Nam has given a thumbs up to your beautiful island just because of the richness of your natural resources. So look after your natural resources, and your natural resources will look after you, in the future. So on that note, anything else you want to share before we finish?
No, thank you. I'd like to thank vinaka vakalevu, Dr. T, and vinaka vakalevu to all the listeners for tuning in. And as you said, please do feel free to get in touch with me if you do have any questions.
Wow, to talk of Saranam. We wish you all the very best with your research in Fiji, as well as your finishing your PhD in the University of Otago. And we know you're going to be doing amazing things in the future. And, down the line, if you have a special project that you want to share with me on the program, just email me. I'd love to
Sure.
have you back on
Yeah.
the show. Saranam.
Naka, Dr. T, Naka.
Iya, naka manda. Yeah,
Mote.
naka. Wow. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. We're so happy to have Namrata Chan joining in from Suva. She's doing a PhD at the University of Otago in Dunedin in the South Island of New Zealand. Such a joy to have her join this program today. She's been so busy. We wanted to have different days for her to come and share her Talanoa, but she had so many other things that was happening. So I said to her, whenever you're free, because I'm also busy here in Honolulu, but we are able to combine our times and get her to come on the program. Yes, just really acknowledging Nam for taking on that field. It's really, really inspiring. I know for many of us, especially parents, because they tumbu, levo na ngona and do rere, beka na nona ding ding na luvenda, yen the marau na ngonelongo, and jing taka na tambana ni marine science, ni asol saranga bi kondo na scholarship. Me bakanda dur ni bule so lewu chuka na ngonongo, yen sa soli bikenda na dur ni buli, merator na ngoni, sa andon din na bibukili, we bikenda ni tumbu. And then sing yung ataka na so ni duru sa wakataw sarang nga banangoni na no narawata na nabuli e pakat kun chik me onam takabo ko na no matay ni kuroy le takabo na no ni kuroy na masters ang ngonongo sa takabo chik na katulu sa no ututi ni no na kuroy ni buku na no na PhD and the family binaka ni bulit chik na ulutang membalata na lumi vai kem do na nongu turanga maramanita may ngau the marota kani levu tu na bi kain bule na klo me buli da oira na da kanta na oira na buku sa buli sartu ngango nam na kakanyang matua na lumi vavi ni binaksara kina ba levu wana ngone leongo na nono sulit me na ngona me da me vitala no na kai binakan sirini kwa sa vavi ni binakan bi kemuni na biokani na nomni sema mai na kavengo ni takno ni bulu binaka tiko na bulu tapanga ni sema tiko mikina wakambulu sarchungo na bakai verto keda na bubale erto bakarong tiko mai na bubale may natokalaw yaw mi kandaw erto tiko bulingo may na bakai bambulu tiko may nung tatalilay sa kusaburay o katalakena turanga tamango na vitalai sorovi, erto tiku bolingo me na wakai me nandi. Au ni taka ni rongo vinaka tukai ni na bio liba, ni vei talanoa kena vio sei, ena kai vinaka ongo. Au sa wako mwade ni vike muni, ena kai vio ongo, na kai tutala ngauna, ena madha ongo vile tukuna bulangera tuwai tiku ngomer na ngai me vio sei tali, au ni taka na muni tali taka, na nona me talanoa tiko na ngonele ongo o Namrata chant. Au sa wako mwade ani me Honolulu, ena yatu Hawaii, ni kai wakadentoka.